Yo, what is going on, guys? XpertFusion here, and today we are going to be ranking all 12 Call of Duty campaigns from worst to best. So I'm only counting the campaigns from Call of Duty 4 all the way up to Modern Warfare. Obviously, Black Ops 4 did not have a traditional campaign, therefore I'm not counting it. I'm not going to count the Specialist HQ mode as a campaign. These are just the main story campaigns. And I'm not counting the original Call of Duty games like 1, 2, 3, Red 1. Because I just don't think they hold up. I know a lot of people love them, have nostalgia for them. I do too. I started with Call of Duty 3 back in 2006, but I just don't think they hold up at all. They're just simple war stories, and they just don't have that same flavor that the game starting with COD 4 has, so I'd probably put them towards the bottom of the list anyways. I just don't feel like it's necessary to count them within this ranking, so we're just going to do the 12 from COD 4 all the way to Modern Warfare, not including Black Ops 4, of course. So of course, this is just my ranking of the campaign modes, not the multiplayer or the zombies. If you want to see my ranking of all the CODs with the entirety of the game in mind, I have a video in the description that I did about 7 months ago, ranking all the 13 Call of Duty games in its entirety, not just the campaign mode, but this is just the campaign. And of course, I love campaigns, right? But I don't love them nearly as much as multiplayer or zombies. Therefore, most of the time, the campaign doesn't affect the game as much as those other modes do for me when I'm ranking them. So there might be a COD game that's really low on this list just because I didn't like the campaign that much, but in reality, for my actual ranking of all the CODs in its entirety, it might be very, very high. And vice versa, there might be a game on this list that's really high up because I really like the campaign, but the game itself I didn't like that much, therefore it's much lower in its entirety. That's why I would like you guys to also check out the other one so you can see my full ranking. But this is just the campaigns, so we can talk about them, compare them. And I also want to say I don't hate any of these campaigns. Even the one that's in the last spot I still think is at least decent. They all have good things about them and they all have bad things about them. But of course there are ones that are much better than the other ones. So let's get into it. And coming in last place in the number 12 spot is going to be Black Ops 3's campaign. And I think this is a pretty obvious answer. Most people would put this here. And I'm going to be honest though, I really did not hate this campaign at all. I actually enjoyed it more than most people did. I don't think it's absolutely trash, terrible, bottom of the barrel, worst possible story you'll ever see. It's just the fact that it's the worst of all of the campaigns, right? I think it's actually underrated. There's a lot of things that people hated on because they just didn't understand it, but if you actually take time to understand the story, it's actually not that bad. But that is one of the negatives, is that it takes too much to understand the story. You know, I like zombies being really confusing with their storyline because it's just what it was always supposed to be. But COD, a campaign, I don't know. I mean, it's very casual for a lot of different fans who just want to hop in and have a good story. They don't want to have to look up YouTube videos to just try to understand it. You know what I mean? It's got a lot to it, and I get that they were trying to go with that really deep feel to it, but the problem is not everyone wants to go through and watch videos or really replay the map or the game multiple times to just try to understand what the hell the story was all about, which is unfortunate because actually some of the story there was actually quite interesting. It had a lot of cool world building with this universe, but they didn't utilize enough. I feel like considering it's a Black Ops 3 game, they should have utilized the previous Black Ops games more. We should have had more connections to the previous stories because there really wasn't much other than it being in the same universe. They didn't utilize the Specialist characters at all, which I feel like they should have. That would have been way more interesting to see the Specialist stories in action. We got some glimpses of the Specialist stories over in Black Ops 4's little Specialist HQ mode, but it would have been nice to at least see them in this mode, and they have some pretty cool backstories, some of them, so it would have been awesome to see them in action, and we didn't get to see any of that. The voice acting was also pretty bad. The missions themselves were very repetitive and not very fun, and it just, like I said, too confusing for most players out there, and that is what makes it the worst campaign out of all of the Call of Duty games of all time. But I still love Black Ops 3 as a whole. It's one of my favorite COD games of all time. If you guys watch my video, you know I put it at the number 2 best spot. But that's because of how great the zombies and multiplayer is in this game, but campaign drives it down a little bit, unfortunately. They also had the Nightmare mode, which was a zombie campaign mode, but it was literally just the campaign mode, but you switch the AI characters out with AI zombies. It's kind of stupid. It's not really that enjoyable, but yeah, not a great campaign. It comes in the last spot. Coming to the number 11th spot, I've got Call of Duty Ghosts, which really wasn't a bad campaign. I think the worst thing about it was the villain Rourke. Rourke was probably the worst written villain I've ever seen in a Call of Duty game because his motives are just uninteresting. They're just not interesting at all. He literally just forgot his memory a little bit and then just said, oh, I believe that this guy was the reason for, the ghosts were the reason for me getting injured or whatever, so I'm gonna go kill them all. It was just such a stupid idea for a villain and such. But what I loved about this game so freaking much was the setting, and I would love to see a game go back in the same setting. It's like kind of modern, a little bit into the future, but not too far. But it was apocalyptic, which had such a cool feel to it because, you know, it's not like a normal world. And they had some really beautiful missions where they showed off some really beautiful landscapes because it's just a deserted place now, which is so interesting to me. I like seeing a whole war go down in an apocalyptic universe. And the characters were kind of iffy. I really didn't care about the characters at all. None of them were interesting. Even the main character you play as, he didn't say a word in the whole campaign. We know nothing about him. A lot of the characters we know nothing about, really. They didn't really further push the story either. They didn't really show much about or explain much about what the hell was going on. Like the Federation, we don't know much about them, right? The game didn't really take steps to teach us about it. Rather, it just showed us a lot of cool explosions and action and put it into a campaign, which this campaign does have some of the best action in the series. Some of the coolest set pieces and interactive moments happen, like the flood and like the whole submarine coming out of the ice scene and the giant building falling over. A lot of cool scenes happen within this campaign, but none of it really matters when the story itself is just so poor. Like, if any of these were to be movies, this one just wasn't entertaining as a movie. I feel like this would be one of those movies that would just be really shit on because it's just not a good story. But the action is pretty fun, and honestly, the game itself is it's more of a fun campaign compared to most campaigns out there. So I got to give it credit for at least being fun. But story is a big part of these games, not just how entertaining it is. Therefore, it has to be pretty low on my list, and all the other ones are just better than Ghosts for sure. Coming to the number 10 spot, I've got Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, which I started with this one. I think I'm starting to really like the campaigns from here on out. Like, I think they're all good. Some of the higher ones obviously being much better, even masterpieces here and there. What I really like about Advanced Warfare's campaign is all the unique gadgets you get to use. So obviously, this wasn't the first futuristic COD game, but this was the first like far futuristic COD game where they went all out with the futuristic era. And I was okay with that because there was a lot of awesome stuff to use within this campaign. Like they had the cool grappling hook and such, and like the invisibility cloaks and all these other gadgets which you get to use in the campaign, and they're really fun to use. I've also said many times I think Advanced Warfare's guns are some of the best gun selection out there. They're really fun weapons, they feel really good, and the setting itself is a really good tone for a campaign. The characters too are pretty good in my opinion. I think Mitchell's pretty great. Iona. Now, where the problem starts to lie is the same with Ghosts. The villain isn't all that interesting. Jonathan Irons, it's a very generic, like, big guy runs this big corporation and he ends up being evil and he's doing it for money and power and such. Very, very generic story, but a lot of these COD games have very generic stories. So I hate the whole complaint about them being generic because they're really all pretty generic when you really think about it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing all the time. Being like other stories isn't necessarily a bad thing. They're not trying to be these completely new, never before seen stories. They're trying to just tell a war story, and war stories tend to be kind of generic. They're very, bad guy, you go try to take out the bad guy, and eventually you take out the bad guy and all his men, and then you finally take out the bad guy, stuff like that. I do think they had some pretty awesome missions in between where you were hunting down that one guy and killing him. That was pretty cool. But the game itself doesn't do much to get you invested in the universe. You get invested in these few characters, but I didn't really care for the universe as a whole. I didn't really care for an Advanced Warfare 2. I didn't want an Advanced Warfare 2 because the universe wasn't all that interesting to me. Therefore, it wasn't that enjoyable. The gameplay, however, is some of the best gameplay I think we've had in any COD campaign ever. The gameplay holds up really well. It is a very, very fun campaign for sure because of the gadgets, because of how they did the different missions. It is a fun campaign, but the rest are just better, to be completely honest. Coming in the number 9 spot, I've got Call of Duty World War II. So Another one I really enjoyed, honestly. I enjoy most campaigns out there. I don't think there's many like terrible campaigns. I don't think any of them are really. There's just some that are not that great, and that was like BO3 and Ghost. But then the rest here are not. They're pretty freaking good. World War II is a great story, and I think what really helps this story is the characters. The characters carry the fuck out of this game, man. Some of the best characters I think in the entire franchise. You really get to feel like they're like a group of brothers. They feel like that. I mean, even just the main character Daniels. I mean, usually the main character doesn't get much screen time and much development because you're playing as them, but they give him a ton of cutscenes, and we had all these little snippets of him writing to his girlfriend and such back home, and that was great. And you had characters like Pearson, which were very, very different. You know, they went from being this like tough badass to like, we started learning more about what happened with him in the past and how he let his soldiers down one time, so he's very, very tough now because of that. You have characters like Turner, who has like this really sad death scene, and then you're obviously your friend Zimmerman. It's just great characters that really carry the story completely, because the story itself, it's just World War II. You know, you can't do much crazy stuff with it because you already know what World War II is about. They can't go above and beyond. They can't surprise us. We know what's going to happen. It's World War II. We know who wins in World War II, so there's not too much at stake. It's more so just reliving World War II experiences, but I do think the game could have gone way further with that. They didn't do enough, I think. They could have shown a lot more brutality, because I don't think it was as brutal as a World War II shooter should be. There should have been way more of that brutality in there. There were some scenes that were a little too much over the top for a World War II game. It should have been a little bit more gritty, a little bit more on the realistic side, because some of it wasn't. Some of it was a little over the top. But you had some great missions, like the one where you have to carry that little girl out of the place. That was intense as hell. And a couple cool other cool missions that were honestly really enjoyable. But I think if you were able to play maybe the Pacific Theater, maybe have some other stories expanding on World War II, it could have been a lot better. I still love this campaign. I think it's very underrated, but compared to the rest, it does not hold up much at all. Coming in at the number 8 spot, I've got Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. This might be a very underrated opinion. I don't think this is that great of a campaign compared to what people say. It's still so revolutionary for its time, but compared to the other campaigns we've gotten, I don't think it's that high. And I see a lot of people putting it like top 2, top 3. I love this campaign. I think it's really, really great. But like I said, it doesn't hold up to the rest, mainly because it is very much a generic war story, more so than any of these other games. The characters aren't all that interesting either. They're just generic soldiers. Price, yes, he was not interesting in this game. I'm sorry, he wasn't. Not until Modern Warfare 2. In this game, I think he was just some badass soldier who kicks ass, but he doesn't have much of a character, I feel like. Not until Modern Warfare 2. Since Soap didn't even say a word, so we didn't know shit about Soap in this game. The characters just weren't that compelling. But it was great for its time. You got to compare it to 2007. I mean, at this time, this was such a revolutionary campaign experience for Call of Duty as a whole, and it made the rest of the campaigns going forward even crazier. And Modern Warfare Remastered just helped amplify that insanity by making it look even nicer and make it more modernized, so it looks a little bit more like a modern game, so we're not playing a game from 2007 anymore. And it looks fantastic. I love a lot of the missions, but at the same time, a lot of the locations you're fighting in, it gets kind of old. You're fighting in like the same sort of places for the majority of the campaign, which I feel like makes it a little bit more tedious and not as enjoyable, because I like when there's a lot of different locations that are very different than one another, but you play the same place for the most part. Still a great campaign nonetheless, just not nearly as good as a lot of people say. Coming in the number 7 spot, I've got Call of Duty World at War, which is kind of similar to COD 4 in the sense that it is a bit outdated and the story was a little bit generic for its time, also falling into the World War II's category where it was not really something they can go above and beyond with because of the fact that it's a World War II story. You can't really go do crazy things that you wouldn't expect because we kind of know the outcome of World War II if you obviously know history. But the campaign was still really great in showing the true horrors of World War II. I mean, it was really a brutal game. I mean, you could do some crazy shit in it, and it showed all the parts of the war, which is what I wanted to see from World War II. But the characters themselves weren't all that amazing except for Rezanov. Rezanov was pretty fantastic, I'll be honest. But the other ones, they weren't all that memorable. I know a lot of people who are big fans of World of War, obviously, they know Roebuck and such, but personally, I don't really see the connection to them. They're just soldiers, and we just remember them because of nostalgia, not because they were actually great characters. But I do feel like a lot of the CODs that are going to be a little bit higher on this list actually have some great damn characters, and you'll obviously see that in a little bit. But this story was interesting. You get to play as some different characters, like you play with Reznov for a little bit, and then you play as the Americans, and you play all sorts of different portions of the war, and it's great to see it, and it's a fun campaign. It is enjoyable to me, and the soundtrack is fantastic. I haven't really mentioned soundtracks for the other games, even though all of them all have good soundtracks. Keep that in mind. Every single one of these games have great soundtracks, but some of them obviously better than others, and World at War's soundtrack is pretty damn fantastic. I really enjoy World at War's campaign, but it's not better than the top 6, so let's get into those. So the most recent Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 comes in the number 6 spot. I really enjoyed this campaign. You know, I don't love the game itself, but this campaign has got to be one of the best campaigns out there. Definitely the most realistic campaign there. It is really real in terms of how it feels, even how it looks. It's definitely the best looking one, and it's obviously the newest, so it's gonna look the best. That just makes sense. It looks gorgeous. Some of the characters are great. You get Price, you get Farah, you get Alex, you get Gaz, you got some great, well, Kyle, I guess you can call him Kyle or Gaz, whatever. Great characters, and it really does set up this universe really damn well. It does have the same problem that COD 4 has, where it doesn't really go to that many different locations. You're fighting in Kyrgyzstan or Verdansk for the majority of this game. There's not really much outside of that. I really do enjoy when these games do a little bit more, but this game didn't really do too much with its locations, which was unfortunate, but at the same time, it was still such a great story involved. I was very, very kind of involved in it. It was, like I said, again, similar to COD 4, but just a little bit more in depth, and that's important. It wasn't as generic as COD 4 because it went more in depth and it did some different things with the story, and you had some great missions like Piccadilly Circus. That mission, fantastic. The Wolf's Den was a fantastic mission as well. A couple of just great missions. Soundtrack was stellar. Really great campaign experience. I do think it could have been a little bit longer. It was a bit short for a campaign. Usually these campaigns are a little bit longer than this, but this is probably one of the shortest ones. But it was short and sweet, and that's all that matters, and I'm excited to see a sequel to it within the future. Coming in at the number 5 spot, Infinite Warfare. Oh my god, this is the most underrated, not even campaign, just game in general. I love the zombies in this game. I love the multiplayer. I put it so high on my ranking list, and people were like, what are you, crazy? This game got so much undeserved hate. It's not even funny, man. It's terrible how much hate this game got, and it did not deserve any of it. And the campaign is no different. One of the best campaigns of all time. I wanted to put it higher, but I couldn't justify putting it higher than the top 4. But it is such a great experience. So one of my favorite things about it is that it takes you on the entire journey. There's no skips. There is not one point in this game where it skips time. You are there from start to finish, going in your jet, flying to where you need to go, going there to back, there to back. You are there for the entire experience. There's obviously some cutscenes that kind of, you know, you're not playing the entirety of it, obviously, but it takes you from mission to mission rather than it being just, you know, selecting missions in like a menu screen. You're there, you're going. If you got to go to space for the next mission on some planet, you're going to take the ship to that planet. That is fantastic. That is so much fun. And it's one of the best looking campaigns too, and it's really able to really show off its looks because of the really cool designs of the different planets they go to. They're not forced to just stay on Earth. They can do so much with this sort of a setting. And I want to see the space setting back again. I don't care if it's an Infinite Warfare 2 or whatever. I want to see the space setting again in a Call of Duty game. It was so perfect to see it, and it was so different and unique from any other game we've seen. All the planets you can travel to and such, fantastic. The characters were great. Lieutenant Reyes, fantastic. Salter, fantastic. So many great characters, and it was one of the only campaigns to actually make me cry. I teared up at the end because of how sad it was. It was not supposed to be, you know, some happy-dappy game. It was sad and depressing at the end because of what happens, and it's like, it's beautiful though because they still won. And it's like, it's such a great story, man. Don't forget about Ethan the Robot too. Great characters. My only negative would be maybe they could have explained the universe a little bit better, kind of like my problem with COD Ghosts, where they didn't really get us involved in the universe enough. but it was still there, and if you looked into it deep enough, you would understand most of what was going on. And I would say probably the best soundtrack, maybe second best. Modern Warfare 2 soundtrack's a little bit better, but one of the best soundtracks of any Call of Duty campaign ever. Fucking amazing game. You gotta go play it if you haven't yet. You have to. Coming number 4 spot, I've got Call of Duty Black Ops 1. Now, one of the best things about this game is the fact that it's the only COD to be in the Cold War era so far. I mean, obviously, if you don't include Black Ops 2's couple missions in the Cold War era, but it's the only game in general to be mainly and primarily set in the Cold War era until next year, obviously, because we're getting the new Black Ops Cold War next year or this year or whatever the hell we get it. But this game has such a good vibe to it. I don't know what it is, but it's really got a great vibe, and I think that's because of the Cold War era, and there's a lot of different locations they go to in this game, and that makes the game feel very, very different. What I love about it, though, is that it went with this sci-fi route. Instead of just being a generic war story, it went with a completely different feel, and it's definitely not that realistic, some of it. Like, it's definitely stuff with, like, the Nova 6 and stuff and the brainwashing. It was a little above and beyond, but I like that. That's what Black Ops is to me. Black Ops is not supposed to be realistic like Modern Warfare is. It's supposed to go a little bit above and beyond. They even have connections to zombies and such in the campaign. Technically, they're in the same multiverse. You probably wouldn't know that if you didn't, look into it, but if you just play the campaign, you wouldn't notice that. But it is there. The character's great. You got Woods, Mason, Hudson, Bowman, great characters, great missions, some of the most enjoyable missions of the entire Call of Duty franchise, like that avalanche mission when you're just, jumping off from all the different avalanche coming down in the snow. Insane stuff. And it's just very unique, I think, compared to any other COD title, and that's probably one of the best things about it. And of course, you have characters like Rezanov returning from World at War to kind of connect it back to World at War a little bit, so they're in the same universe. And that is awesome, the whole stuff with the numbers and such. It's a very eerie, mysterious game, and that vibe better carry over to the new COD this year or next year or whenever the hell it comes out. And now we're in the top 3. Coming in number 3 spot, I've got Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and this game is epic, man. So epic. Again, just like Black Ops 1, so many cool locations. You get to go to London, you get to go to New York City, you get to go to Paris, you get to go to Germany, all these awesome places in this game. I mean, this is what I wanted from games like, World War II and COD 4 and the newest COD. They didn't go to enough locations. I feel like you need to go to all these cool places because it just makes the game feel more unique and you're not fighting in the same couple locations in the game. And they've really advertised this as being a game with all sorts of locations because it is World War III in full force. Modern Warfare 2 kind of started the whole World War III thing, but this one put it in full force, and it's such a cool story to have within the game. Way cooler than COD 4. Come on now. It's so much more enjoyable, this game. Like, if you're trying to go for a realistic military shooter, yeah, you're probably going to like COD 4 more or the new Modern Warfare, but if you want something like a movie-like that's just insane, crazy, action-packed fun, this game has that, and the story itself is still really great. Makarov, one of the coolest villains in COD history, his whole motives and his whole ideology is something that makes you just be like, holy shit, this dude is insane. And having Price, Yuri, Soap, and all these great characters on this mission, then you get to play as the other characters like Frost and such. It's so cool. And then that final mission when you get to finally take out Makarov, the main villain behind this entire franchise, such a satisfying mission, such a satisfying conclusion to the Modern Warfare story. It's exactly what we wanted from this campaign. I remember playing it for the first time, man. You have such cool missions. Remember the mission in the plane called Turbulence when it's flying up and down and it crashes? It's an epic campaign, and that's honestly what I want from these games. So yeah, it comes in number 3. Coming in number 2 spot, I've got Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Now, this is my favorite Call of Duty game of all time, but campaign, one of them beats it out just by a little bit. But I still absolutely love this campaign. I think it's definitely underrated. One of my favorite things about it are the different choices that change the outcome of the story. Now, not everyone likes that, especially because it makes it so, like, some of the stuff, what do you count as canon? You know what I mean? Like, what do you count as canon? But since it's kind of the final game in this little franchise, I know they had Black Ops 3 and 4, but they don't really connect all that well, so it does feel like the final game in the franchise. And also because there's multiverses established within the Black Ops universe already, I'm okay with having all these different storylines because you just pretend they're in different multiverses and they kind of make sense to you a little bit. But I do like these different changes that change the outcome of the story. Menendez, the greatest villain in COD history by far. He is the most interesting, the most unique, the most terrifying, the most brutal villain we have ever seen in a COD game. And I think he honestly killed the performance. I don't know who the voice actor is, but he killed the performance. The cast is fantastic in this game. You got Woods, Alex and David Mason, Harper, Hudson, who are all played by pretty damn good actors. I mean, Michael Rooker is in this damn game playing Harper. What a fantastic cast. The future era mixed with the Cold War era all in one game. It's such a great combination because it, pleases those who want that old feeling game, but also want this new futuristic era, which is the first game to go with the futuristic era. And we get all sorts of cool gadgets and such to use, really cool locations, like the war in Los Angeles was so awesome. It's intense as fuck, it's brutal as fuck. Remember that mission? It's sad too when you get to see Mason die, Alex. It was emotional, right? And then in certain endings, Woods can die. In certain endings, Menendez dies. It's just so many different endings and so many different, like, holy shit moments. That is what this campaign is. And the campaign just kills it in all those locations. And it was also the first campaign to have full-on cutscenes, which was huge for this sort of a game. You know what I mean? To see cutscenes, and they were beautiful looking as well. Great campaign, man. But it's not the best. Of course, we know what the best one is. So the number one Call of Duty campaign has got to be Modern Warfare 2, and I don't love this game as a whole. I put it pretty low on my ranking. I think the multiplayer is overrated, but the campaign is phenomenal from top to bottom. It's pretty much a masterpiece. It recently got a remaster as well, which makes it just look nicer, which is great to see. It's really emotional. You have some really sad scenes like Roast and Goach dying as well. The complexity added to this universe was fantastic. Price, Soap, all these great characters actually given an actual character now. They actually have traits to them. They're not just generic war soldiers now. They're actually interesting. Great locations. You have shocking missions like No Russian, which was just huge. I mean, it was really controversial as well, which was like crazy. Shepard, the whole twist with him was insane, and then going to kill him in the end was one of the coolest missions ever. This is a very badass, epic campaign, just like Modern Warfare 3, which, like I said, is what I want from these games. I want some badass, epic scenes that make you go, holy shit. I don't necessarily need something that makes you feel like you're actually in a war, because no, this doesn't feel like that at all. It just feels like a crazy, fun adventure that would work really well as a movie, I have to say. And the soundtrack by Hans Zimmer is phenomenal. The best soundtrack from any COD game ever. I love this campaign. I know a lot of others do as well. That is my ranking for all the campaigns in Call of Duty history, other than obviously the first couple campaigns. We're just starting with COD 4, of course. But let me know your list in the comment section below. If you want to include the older ones, go ahead and do it. If you want to include Specialist HQ from Black Ops 4, go ahead. I don't really care. But the ones I've included here, let me know. If you disagree or agree with my ranking, I'd be curious to know. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys on my next one. Peace out.